Hello again everyone, back in the shed. It's been a little while since I last posted anything. There's just been a lot going on in life as usual. I do try and get one video out a week at least, even if it's not something from the shed. But it just so happens there's just been a lot on recently, so I've not had the time to. The good news is I've got a little bit of time off work, so I might actually be able to get a few days worth of recording in over the next week or so, which is great. There's not really been anything happening with the guitar build. In the last video, I trimmed down this neck blank and kind of planned out where the nut was going to be and all that kind of thing. We've got some circular saw marks that we need to deal with, probably just with the electric sander. That should make short work of those, I would have thought. But something slightly exciting while we've been off air, as it were. Frank had a friend through work who he knew who is into making, or was into making furniture, who decided to give it all up and was basically getting rid of pretty much the entire contents of his workshop. So Frank actually managed to acquire that without my knowledge, which was great. And I thought I'd just quickly go off camera and show you what he's managed to get, because it's quite a bit. So, you know, obviously already we have the little bandsaw and the drill. There's the template I made last time. And recently, as you know, I purchased the table saw, which is great. So first off, there is a little detail sander. There is some, what I believe are jigs for doing, sort of finger jointing. Is it finger jointing? What's the one where it's triangular? There's some jigs there for doing joints, which may actually come in handy if ever I want to do my own guitar cabinet from scratch or anything like that. Down here on the floor, quite excitingly, we have a planer for planing up boards and making them straight. Really wish I'd had that previously. And there's actually, under this plastic, a second planer. That one's a planer thicknesser, which I really could have done with, so that's fantastic as well. The cabinet that it's actually sat on top of is a homemade router table, far better than mine, with all the fences and dust extraction and everything already on it. And that actually has a 1/4" router in it as well, which is brilliant. So that means I'll be able to use that for all my router table work going forward, and it frees up my Triton router for all the big handheld stuff like doing pickup routing and all that kind of thing. There are a load of clamps, as you can see, knocking about, which is great, so I don't have to worry about those for gluing up. Probably most importantly, a really decent dust extractor with a load of spare bags and everything for it, which again is great. There's also a smaller 1/4" router, which I might actually get to make use of today. The good thing about this one is it's got much better visibility on it than the Triton router. It's got far less features, but that might come in really handy for jobs where I really need to see. I'm planning on maybe using it to route the truss rod today. The only thing that worries me is I don't think it has a variable speed, but never mind. Also, don't know how much they'll come in handy, but there are a couple of fine chisels which could be good for doing inlays and that kind of thing, and they are sat within a box of all kinds of waxes and finishes and all that kind of thing. I don't know where they're located currently as well, but there were actually some various bits and bobs for what were they for? Sort of drill bits for cutting square holes and various other things like that. Got the hoses to go with the dust extractor. There's actually a thing down here as well, rather randomly, which is like a guillotine for cutting thin bits of wood, and a mitre, which I believe is used for picture framing, which obviously has got nothing to do with guitars, but I do actually do photography and everything as well, so you never know, that might come in handy at one point. Yeah, I think that's it from the new tools. So as you can well imagine, I'm quite excited about all of that. It's just kind of typical that I'm I'm to the point with the guitar now where all my planar thicknessing type activity and all the serious cutting and jointing is kind of already done. So I'm probably not going to make much use of those machines on this guitar, but when it comes to building the next guitar, I'm going to be quite excited to use those. As you can imagine, it's getting a little bit full in here now, actually. Because we've got the new router table, I'll be getting rid of my old Black & Decker Workmate style table. Well, it was a Black & Decker Workmate that I bastardized to make a table. I think as well the wobbly workbench, which is just sat down here to my right, the little hobbyist kind of workbench, it's not really been very good for us from the start, so we have actually sold that. That's going to go in the post probably later today. And we'll probably look towards actually building something a little bit more solid. There is actually talk in the works as well. Frank does have another sort of workshop area already that he uses to work on his cars, doing motorsport and all that kind of thing. And for a little while we've been talking about maybe clubbing together and getting a slightly larger workshop space that we could both use, which would allow me to sort of bust out of the shed. I don't know what I'm going to call this podcast. If it's no longer in a shed, we'll have to come up with something else maybe. But yeah, that's probably not going to be anytime soon, but that's something that's on the horizon. But in the meantime, I'm just going to have to make do with what I can. The only thing that worries me a little bit is I've kind of got no bench space going forward for the time being. But never mind, let's make use of it while we still can today. So, the plan today, as I say, I think I'm going to quickly run the random orbital sander over this just to take some of the saw marks out and see what we're left with. It may well be that I have to remark it up if I take my pencil marks off in doing that. And then we'll start prepping to route the truss rod channel. Right, so I've employed the new router table as a workbench for the time being, and we're just going to give the wood a quick going over with this finishing sander just to get rid of some of those marks. Yep, that still looks good and flat. Same again on the other side. All right. So, the truss rod is an unusual length. It's 480mm long, which I believe is slightly longer than your kind of standard truss rod you'd get in, say, Les Paul. But it is the size that the plans called for. I have been told that a slightly shorter truss rod is absolutely fine as long as it's basically covering the length of the majority of the length of the fretboard, then you're absolutely fine. It is 9mm deep and 6mm wide, which is basically 1/4 of an inch, which just so happens to be the exact same width of the wenge piece in the center of the neck. So when it comes to routing out for this, what we should hopefully be doing is effectively removing just the wenge. I think it's going to be very difficult to actually get just the wenge and not get into the maple. I don't think we can be that accurate, but that is basically what we're aiming for. But because I've sanded the top off, I need to just quickly mark out where my nut and everything is again, just to make sure everything's going to match up. So let's do that now. we'll just grab my fretboard and make sure that looks right. Certainly looks right against the blank. Yep, that looks right to me. So if I remember rightly, one of these sides might have been a little bit thicker than the other. Alright, so I've got the guide rail and the depth on this router locked off as best I can. I've never even used this router before, and as I say, it doesn't have variable speed. I'm a little bit apprehensive about starting it up and then just kind of trying to drop it in like that, because it may steer off. So what I'm actually going to do is just test it on the end here where I'll actually be cutting in anyway. I think I should probably fix the working place as well, to be fair, so let's get that done. Okay, good job I tested. So, it looks perfect once it's in, but there is that danger of it dancing around before it starts. So I think what I need is to drill a hole. So I'm going to use a 6mm pointed bit. And I'm actually just going to make that slightly wider with 6.5. So if I have that hole pre-drilled and keep it firmly in place, hopefully that should stop the little dance at the start. Yes, we can see that's worked fine. So that's our plan. Now the truss rod's not going to fit in there yet because we need to do the nut end bit, but let's just see if it looks like it's heading in the right direction. Certainly looks like it. Spot on. Okay, so a little unsure how to tackle this one. I've seen people kind of go down with the drill and then turn the drill sideways, or I could route. I think I'll see what the drill feels like. Okay, so the truss rod's in, but I haven't quite got the access for the Allen key yet. There we go, so we've got it to the point where the key can get in to adjust the truss rod. Truss rod's lying nice and flat there. I do think the truss rod actually has an ever so slight lip. Might be worth me just running the router along there again, just ever so slightly deeper, but it's so close. There we go, much better. Fortunately it has slackened the width. Width weighs a little bit I think, but it's not rattling around. But at least I can't feel the truss rod above the surface the fretboard's going to be glued onto now, so that's great. So that's the truss rod channel officially done. The next thing I want to do is cut away the slope, or the angle if you like, of the top of the headstock. I've already used the template that I made earlier to mark a line for where the cut is to be made. The only question that remains is what to actually make the cut on. I've got the choice between the bandsaw and the circular saw. Whenever I've seen anyone do this, they've generally used the bandsaw, although they've generally had a much steadier hand and a much bigger bandsaw than me. I know that if I try to cut that out on the bandsaw, there's going to be some waviness to it, which is okay. I can level it off with sanding or with a plane. I'm sure that'll be perfectly doable. The alternative is to use the table saw, which I think is much more likely to give me a straight cut. It might be more prone to tear out, although I've been okay with it so far. But bear in mind, we're at the absolute maximum cut height for the table saw with that. And when it comes to cross cutting, last time I used it, the table wasn't particularly flat, and I don't know whether I'm going to be able to remedy that or not. So I think I might spend 5 minutes off camera just having a look at the table saw and seeing what I think. And then if I'm not happy with it, we might go with the bandsaw. Alright, so I've just been doing a little bit of figuring out off camera. First off, the table saw is actually out because it can only do up to a 30-degree mitre. I could make some kind of jig if I really wanted to find that 10 degrees I'm looking for, but it's going to be more hassle than it's worth. So I think we're going to be looking at the bandsaw. I'm just going to have to be very careful with it. Also, before making a cut, again, I've used the masking tape just to mark out the angle because it's easier to see. But I wanted to wait until I got my tuning heads, which are just actually basic Toman locking tuners, Gibson style. I've just been taking some measurements and trying to suss things out, and what I really wanted to make sure was, first of all, that the headstock was going to be thick enough to actually screw, I don't even know what these are called, like to screw the tuners all the way in, basically, not have them protruding unnecessarily from the top. Secondly, I also wanted to make sure that the point at which the string comes out of the tuning head is not going to be higher than the top of the nut, or should I say higher than the groove in the nut. Because obviously if the tuning head is above the nut, the string's not going to make contact with the nut, and then it's just not actually going to work as intended. After taking some measurements, because of the thinness of the wood, we're playing with very fine margins. The headstock itself can't be more than, or can't be thinner than 1 centimetre. I've got it marked out there at the moment at exactly 1 centimetre. Also, I think at that angle with the tuner in the place that it would be if it was on a PRS, I think I'm right in saying the total height from the baseline to the top where the string would be is about 22 millimeters, and I've worked out that the string would need to be resting 5 mil above the height of the base of the headstock as it is at the moment, so 5 mil above this line basically. Now on a typical nut, the groove would actually be pretty much bang on 5 mil, but I think given the fact that my fretboard is pretty damn thick, if I don't take that down too much when I'm radiusing it, that's actually going to buy me an extra mil, maybe 2 mil. So if, in other words, if I have a fairly tall nut, I should be okay. There is also a rescue option which I've planned in, which is if it turns out that this does end up too high, or it ends up that the headstock is a bit too thin, what I can effectively do is glue a veneer onto the back of the headstock, which will push the base of the tuner further back and it'll rescue it basically. I'm trying to avoid veneers on the headstock just because the palm wood is obviously quite nice to look at, but it may well just come to that for practicality's sake, which is fair enough. If it does come to that, I might try and come up with something special for the veneer anyway. But no, it's been a good day. We will be back soon. There definitely won't be as big a gap as there was last time. But until next time, goodbye.